Hey everybody, and welcome back to Weather for Weather Geeks Wednesday evening edition. And it was a record breaker as expected this morning, and some of the numbers were very, very impressive here locally. Now, of course, as you know, if you're watching this video, we get our official observations from the Youngstown Warren Regional Airport, where we did set a record low this morning. When we look back at recent years, the last 24 plus years, the record highs locally have outnumbered the record lows, almost a 2-to-1 margin. You know, when it gets cold like this, and when there's snow in Florida, you know, I see comments about all the global warming, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, global warming is still happening. Just because it snowed in Florida and because it's been cold here lately does not disprove global warming or climate change, that is for sure. 10 below the low this morning officially at the airport. The old record 9 below set in 2022. Now, this was the coldest temperature we've seen in about 7 years in our area. Our forecast was for minus 12. If we had hit that, it would have been our coldest reading in almost 10 years across the valley. So 105 to 59, the record highs versus the record lows since the year 2000. And we weren't alone in the records this morning. Records were tied or broken at many climate reporting sites in eastern Ohio and western PA, New Philly, Akron, Wheeling, Pittsburgh. Everyone way below zero this morning. And, you know, the local thermometers, all these are unofficial, but the way we construct this map is these are personal weather stations that we don't have any control over, and you can see there's a few blank ones here. There's usually a few blank ones on the map, and the reason for that is, you know, maybe these stations, the internet's down at their house. Maybe they've taken the station offline. Could be any number of reasons, but these are kind of out of our control, and they're certainly unofficial, I should say. But look at some of these numbers. I mean, this station down here is actually mine in southeastern Columbiana County, so I know this one is a good reading. My thermometer is sighted a little bit higher than it should be. You know, a thermometer properly sighted is about 5 feet or so off the ground. Mine's closer to 10 feet, but nonetheless, I live in a fairly sheltered valley. And so my weather station always runs cold on clear, relatively calm nights like last night, and we had great radiational cooling conditions last night. So I had not only minus 18, it was minus 18 and a half for the low temperature this morning at my personal weather station. But some of these numbers, I mean, look at this stuff. I mean, for me personally, this was the coldest temperature I've witnessed myself, been a party to, if you will, since 1994. Now, I've seen, you know, plenty of sub-zero temperatures since then, but this is the coldest temperature, coldest air I've felt personally in a little over 30 years since that historic outbreak in January of 1994. So, yeah, very impressive stuff out there this morning, and even more impressive, perhaps, the truly generational or once-in-a-lifetime snows in the Deep South. I touched on this some last evening, but the final numbers are in, and wow, I mean, double-digit snowfall totals in parts of Louisiana. 8-9 inches, pretty common in the western panhandle of Florida, southern Georgia, the Carolinas, especially the eastern part of the Carolinas, Myrtle Beach. You know, you saw a lot of pictures and video online today of snow piled high on the beach, on top of the sand, people out and about on the beach, walking through snow. And, you know, I mentioned this, I think, last evening. I think a lot of future meteorologists were probably inspired by the incredible weather events in the Deep South over the last 24 hours. A lot of kids and maybe teenagers in maybe places like New Orleans or Pensacola or even Myrtle Beach became a lot more interested in the weather because of how crazy it's been over the last day or so. Closer to home, of course, it's no surprise with all the cold. We're starting to see quite a bit of ice on some of our area rivers, and the Great Lakes have seen a big uptick in the ice coverage, especially relatively shallow Lake Erie. It's about 80% coverage right now, specifically on Lake Erie. Now, the Great Lakes system as a whole is sitting at about 21% ice coverage, and that is easily the high mark so far this winter season. Now, the weather has quieted down once we got yesterday's storm off the playing field. There's not much going on here across the lower 48 states. This little clipper out here heads our way tomorrow and can produce a few flurries and snow showers, perhaps, before the day is through. That's pretty much the only game in town. It's still cold. The storm is gone, but it's still cold in the south. When it's 56 in Miami, that sounds pretty nice to us, but that's pretty chilly by Miami standards. Orlando's down in the 30s and 40s. New Orleans and a good chunk of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, all in the 20s to around 30. Raleigh, North Carolina at 24. And here locally, as of the 7 o'clock hour, we're at a toasty 11 degrees. Always fun to compare us to Alaska in certain weather regimes. Usually when The weather in Alaska is abnormally mild. The opposite is true in parts of the lower 48, especially the eastern parts of the lower 48 states. So we are, in eastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania, pretty much uniformly around 10 or 11 at this hour. Anchorage, Alaska is 38, Kodiak 41. Now, of course, it's colder in the interior parts of Alaska, but a lot of these numbers are still very mild for Alaska in the dead of winter in the middle of January. Our wind chills tomorrow morning, no fun, but not the 25 below that we had in parts of the area this morning. I think we're looking at 0 to 5 below for wind chills as our Thursday gets underway. We'll see those wind chills recovering into the teens for the afternoon. This next system comes through with maybe a few flurries late afternoon, maybe even a heavier snow shower in a couple of spots early in the evening, maybe around 7 or 8 o'clock. That'll be a possibility. Might see some coatings out of that, perhaps, if you get under a heavier snow shower early Thursday evening. After this front, it's a cold Friday with clouds and sunny breaks, no higher than about 20 or 21 on Friday. Weather looks pretty benign over the weekend, though. This next warm front lifts in and could produce a couple of flurries late Saturday night, and first thing on Sunday morning. But I mentioned this last evening on Weather for Weather Geeks, and I think the idea holds a lot of water still, that we don't stand to have many big chances for snow, or chances for significant snows, perhaps more elegantly put, for much of the rest of the month. Maybe that'll change as we go into February and we get a more active storm track. But right now, the airflow across the lower 48 states is out of the northwest. It's dry. It's cold, but it's just too dry to wind up a huge or a significant snow event in our part of the country. We'll have more updates on next week's forecast, the February outlook, and much, much more coming up on Weather for Weather Geeks Thursday evening, Friday evening, and again next week. Hope you'll join us then. Have a great rest of your Wednesday night. I'll see you back here on Thursday.